All right, so Boston has a new anti-displacement plan, and this is like a bad magician's trick that promises to save your neighborhood while simultaneously making your wallet disappear. That is what this is. Even Mass Daily News, they said it best. They said, if you worked hard, you bought a home, you speak English, and you live in a quiet neighborhood, congratulations. You are officially not a priority in Mayor Michelle Wu's Boston. That could not be any more accurate. Whatever happened to a home for everyone? I mean, she says this in almost every single interview. What happened to that? Even according to the city's own displacement risk map. You guys are not going to believe this, by the way. You're not going to believe this. If your neighborhood is whiter, speaks more English, and owns more homes, you are officially low risk and not worth the city's time. How about that? Now, it's a home based on who they pick, because what they are selling as some kind of lifeline could just be like a noose that strangles the city's economy even further, because it's going to push out the very people that it's supposed to protect. It should be protecting everybody. And what it'll end up doing is it's going to leave the taxpayers holding the bag for billions in failed experiments. That's all this is. And yes, you heard that right. This isn't some feel-good policy win. It's a recipe for disaster. And it's already like, look, before I make these videos, I always do my research. And if you look to other cities like San Francisco, like New York, and like Portland, they all tried this and they all had the same problems. So I would say by the end of the video, you'll see why Boston's plan, this is not innovative. It's just another recycled problem or recycled nightmare. Now look, let's start with the hook that they dangle, and it's called stabilization. The plan, they're trying to promise to stabilize residents while welcoming new neighbors and keeping commercial units alive. I would say that sounds pretty damn noble, right? But when you dig and you dig and you dig, this is like a dance of good intentions laced with traps on the floor. That's all this is. They kick off with that displacement risk map, which it's just unbelievable I'm even talking about these things. This is basically some kind of fancy tool to spot the, again, at-risk areas and proactively intervene within those areas. Then there's a laundry list like expanded condo conversion rules, there's eviction protections, there's tenant purchase rights, there is, what's the other one? Lottery preferences for affordable housing, tax relief for homeowners, and trying to push for the big one, rent stabilization. I told you guys, I told you this was coming. I told you this was going to happen. Now, on the commercial side, they want to try to push like these tax exemptions for small businesses, cultural zoning, and funds to buy up properties, all wrapped up in this, I think what they're calling a 4-piece framework, which is protect, preserve, produce, and prosper. Now, the core assumption here is that government can micromanage markets without screwing everything up. And unfortunately, you know, history shows that that is not humanly possible. They assume more regulations means more stability. But again, history tells a different story. If you take rent stabilization, for example, Boston is pushing for a 10% cap or CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, plus 6%, whichever is lower here. So that could sound fair on paper, but again, what history has taught us is that these landlords, they don't invest in these areas. Their units end up deteriorating, and new builds, they completely grind to a halt, because who wants to pour cash into a money pit where they're not going to make their return on investment? Also, supply shrinks. Rents end up increasing, and they end up increasing for the unregulated units. That is the problem here. And people end up, like, everyday people end up getting priced out anyway. So, for example, San Francisco, they tried something like this too. They tried a strict rent control. And in 2018, they crunched the numbers. And what ended up happening is that they reduced the supply of rentals by 15%. In turn, rents went up 5.1% citywide and ended up displacing low-income tenants faster than it helped them. So why did this happen? It's very, very simple, guys. Landlords ended up converting their rental units into condos that they ended up selling, or they just let the buildings sit and rot. That's it. End of story. The end game results, look at it this way. Gentrification, they want to decelerate gentrification, but it ended up accelerating it. It did not slow down. This is not stabilization. This is eviction purely by economics. If they are using some kind of advanced modeling scenario, please send it to me so I could review it, okay? Send it to me so I could review the damn thing. Now let's pivot to their eviction protections and access to legal counsel. So this plan expands the legal aid for tenants with pilot programs for families and pushes the state legislation for broader access, okay? And I get it. There's an emotional pull here, and it's massive because nobody wants families on the street. I understand that, okay? So let's do this. Let's assume that tenants get free lawyers to level some kind of playing field by cutting down evictions. Therefore, in theory, it would grant more stability. But here is where the conflict comes into play, guys. New York City tried something similar. They rolled out a Universal Access Council back in 2017. It was 2017 or 2016. So evictions ended up going down. They went from 247,000 in 2013 to 118,000 in 2024. And that's per New York City comp data or comp controller data. But here's what ended up happening. Landlords hiked the rents preemptively to cover any levels of legal risks. This was noted in a Furman Center report on trade-offs. What's worse is that the smaller mom and pop landlords, they got crushed, okay? They got absolutely crushed, and they ended up selling out to big corporations. So when you think about it, the net effect was that there were fewer affordable units with more corporate control. Now, if that's what Boston wants, that's what Boston is going to get. You could even look to, the other one was Portland, Oregon, right? They did something similar. It was called a just cause eviction rule back in 2019. Then there was also something called a Cascade Policy Institute. What their reporting showed that multifamilies, they dropped by 20% in terms of building because of these regulations, and rents ended up going up by 14% in the neighboring towns. Then they ended up doubling down on producing housing with office to rental conversions. And that also failed. Everything that they tried failed, okay? Boston could use more units and converting office space into rentals could work. But the problem here is that they're implementing this in the wrong way. They want some sort of diversity preservation or something like that, which prioritizes certain people throughout these lotteries in certain areas. So look at it this way, right? If they want to battle this gentrification and figure that local preferences will glue neighborhoods together so there will be less displacement, it's not going to happen, guys. In practice, on paper, it could happen, but in practice, it just doesn't happen that way. But what ends up happening is that it just builds these cliques of people, and it scares off investors and developers who hate this red tape and this regulation. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. Here's another example, okay? Seattle, they had a community preference policy. They launched that back in 2019. They tried to prioritize at-risk areas, but what ended up happening here is that it ended up reducing the overall affordable housing applications amid biases and lawsuits. There was lawsuits because of this stuff. And that's per HUD's moving to work report. Remember, this is all based on reporting. Meanwhile, housing production ended up stalling and rents raised by 7% annually, which to my knowledge is higher than what it would normally rise. So simply put, Boston's plan is risking the same exact outcomes, which is, look at it this way, more bureaucracy, fewer builds, and higher costs passed to everybody else. And even the commercial side is honestly no better. They end up dangling this carrot of like tax breaks, these for small businesses, cultural funds, and zoning, changes to zoning to lock in what they deem are priority uses. I don't even know what the hell that means. Who is the one determining priority? The state is, right? The government is. So they want to tweak like these tax codes and zoning codes, and they want to end up building some kind of prosperity with zero blowback. It does not work that way. You could look at New York City for this because their commercial protection plan, they tried pushing this back in like the early 2010s or something like that, and it completely backfired. Their 2021 housing survey showed that thousands of units were pulled off of the market, with commercial spots hitting over 10% vacancy because landlords, they ended up just playing the waiting game. Like, you can't have your cake and eat it. That's what it boils down to. Even Portland tried this cultural zoning, and a city report showed from 2023, it flagged a coordinated screw up that preserved diversity, but wound up choking any kind of real growth and investment within their city. Even like I was reading, there was even artists that got pushed out because the cost spiked so high everywhere else. This is what happens when you do stuff like this. This entire plan is just one big sales pitch, except it's all just smoke and mirrors, guys. This city is leaning on heartstrings and not proof. And they're assuming that more rules means less displacement. But there's absolutely zero evidence here. And the crazy thing about this is that they beg for more housing. They want more housing. But all of this red tape, guess what? That sends any builder, any developer running. They're going to invest in other cities or other locations. That's it. Any feasible fixes are complete fantasy. So this isn't protection. This is just more control. All of the cities I mentioned tried something similar and ended up tanking the economies. It increased the costs of rents, and it displaced more people and more businesses than it was meant to help. Boston is heading in the same direction unless they decide to wake up. Again, if somebody wants to send me some level of modeling, if they did any modeling on this, I will gladly review that modeling if they want to change my sentiment on this. But again, when you try to implement something, look at it this way, guys. When you try to implement something, I would think that common practice would look to other similar cities. Not to say these cities are the same, right? In terms of geography, in terms of how many people are there, in terms of square mileage. I understand all of those things are different, but I mean, they want to be a trailblazer in these things, but this is very, very risky when you do stuff like this. And it's very, very risky because they are, or I should say, I am basing this on failed experiments in other parts of the country. Okay. So if they want to send me the methodology behind this, please send it to me. I will look at it and I will review it here live. I will do it. But overall, every single time they try to do something and similar policy or similar legislation or similar red tape ends up increasing prices, or people move out, or the communities that are outside of this area end up even increasing their price. It just keeps pushing people further and further and further away. I hope that makes sense, guys. This is completely ludicrous to me, by the way. I hope I made sense in this. I know this was a little bit more complicated, but basically not good. All right. That's it for today's video, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.